Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I have something very special, and that is a Yamaha Riva 180. It's quite a quirky, strange bike, but it's a bike that it's got a loyal following. You do not see many of these out on the road at all. Actually, this is the first Riva I've ever seen, and I had to buy it. This is a 180Z. There are several other versions of it, including the Deluxe. And they did make a 50, they also made a 125. And of course, the 180 has been the one that's most popular. Then they have a 200, and I have never seen one of those. But today, I'm gonna take you around this bike and show you around along with some of the history. So to understand why there's so many scooters in the 80s, it was all mostly dominated by the Honda Elites. The Honda Elite 125 and specifically more the 150, they were everywhere. They had this very edgy 1980s futuristic style, and it became very popular.
How to ride a Honda scooter. First, select shirt pant combo. We suggest this or this. Next, select appropriate shoes. We suggest 2.
Then choose a scooter that best expresses your individuality. There are many sizes and colors.
And always wear your helmet.
Honda scooters. They're everything but ordinary.
There was 2 oil crises in the 1970s, and manufacturers that made motorcycles, they needed to go head on with the rising gas prices. And what they did, they decided to make scooters that got 80, 90 miles to the gallon. And that's why you have the Honda Elite and the Riva. The Riva was a competitor to the Elite. Yamaha said, oh, Honda can't get all of the market. But they went a different way. The Honda Elite is futuristic. It looks like a spaceship, and it's very cool looking. But Yamaha wasn't looking for the modern style. They actually looked at Lambretta and Vespa to create the Riva. So that's why it looks this way, and that's why it's so funky looking. You know, it is kind of a timeless style. But the rising gas prices is what created the scooter boom of the 1980s. This particular Riva is very rare. I have never seen a Riva in the wild. So let's talk about Riva history. Prior to the Riva, Yamaha had a moped-like scooter. I forgot the name of it. But then they came up with the Riva 50, the XC50. That thing was a little tiny 50cc 2-stroke, and it got very popular. And then they came out with the XC125, which was a smaller version of this. And later, they came up with this one, the XC180. 180 cc's is quite big. And then they had the XC200. In the Riva game, the 200 is the most sought after because they apparently have fixed a lot of the carburetor issues. Just look at the styling. In an age of angular, spacey plastics, the Riva kept it soft and smooth, rounded curves, simple lines, a wide, cushy seat. This thing is basically a rolling sofa. Yamaha wasn't trying to look like the future. They were just trying to look like Italy. The Riva draws heavy inspiration from Vespas and Lambrettas, not Japanese sport bikes. It's got more charm than flash. Have a 10-inch tire, and notice the gold color. That is a very 80s and early 90s thing. And I do like the wheel. Also, 90-degree stem. Notice there's no fork holding that front wheel. You have a little cover for the drum brake right here. And the way to adjust it is by tightening it here. 2 forks on the left side. So this could be a good thing or bad. Styling-wise, it looks cool. But if you ever hit something, this gets bent pretty easily. So don't hit anything. In the rear, we also have another single-sided arm, so there is nothing attached to here. And then you have the exhaust. That's the stock exhaust. A little rusty, but it works fine. There's no holes. 10-inch tire in the rear as well. Another interesting thing about this bike, on the right side, you have piece of plastic. It's a fairly large piece of plastic. If you're used to working on modern bikes, you'll realize that removing plastic is a pain in the ass. Yamaha didn't do that. There's 2 screws, one here and then one in the front, and this pops out. It's very easy to remove. And notice the little subtle gold piping that they put that echoes the style of the wheels. Where is the dipstick? Where is the sight glass? Well, you have to actually remove this plastic in order to see that. It's a very strange design flaw, but I guess like Yamaha wanted to create something that was more for commuters. They didn't want to deal with like any weird things on the outside, so they decided to cover the entire thing with plastic. The good thing is that it's easy to remove. The bad thing is you have to remove it to check your oil. They give you a dipstick right in here. You can pull that out and actually check your rear drive oil level without removing any plastic. So that is a good thing. But also notice that all of this is plastic, the rear. One of the things that happened when I was like putting this bike on my trailer, this thing hits. It's very low to the ground, which keeps mud off the whatever's behind. So that's a good thing. Also, integrated blinkers. My blinkers are not working currently, but look at the real estate here. And of course, with the 1980s, you had these massive brake lights. And up here, you have still the sticker that comes with the bike, which is the cold pressure, and it comes in French and English. And you also have a nice little rack because, as you're going to find out, there is hardly any storage on these bikes, but it's not uncommon. These bikes were more meant to be just fuel-efficient vehicles rather than utility vehicles. Scooters nowadays have become utility vehicles. Foot pegs for your passenger. You also have a very short kickstand. And this thing is so tiny. And also, when you are wanting to put it on the kickstand, you have to kind of find it. There's only like this little nub here. Also on the Riva, the floorboard, this is a little carpeting, is not exactly flat. There's a little hump here and with some pattern, and then you have Yamaha here. And then notice that on the right side, you have a foot brake. That's a very 1980s thing. Storage in this bike is right here. That's it. That is your storage. There's my toolkit. The original toolkit is all you get. I mean, you can maybe store a bottle of water, a very small one, in your wallet, but it's not the best storage solution. Normally under the seat, this is where you would store quite a bit of stuff. But let me show you. When you open up the seat, push it up. Well, that is right. But I do admire these 1980s bikes for maintenance because they're very easy. Some bikes are harder than others. This one is a little bit hard. And gas cap. So here's another weird thing about this gas cap. Yamaha didn't give you even like some sort of like horizontal bar that kind of comes up so you can turn it. You have to kind of use this. And sometimes it's kind of on tight. Like for right now, you have to kind of do that to kind of pull it up. Not exactly a good engineering feat. And then you have a piece of rubber here that protects the gas tank. The gas tank is in surprisingly good shape. You have these bars that kind of hold the gas tank in. You have your battery, and then you have various things. You could actually get to 2 fuses over there. Not very difficult. And of course, the seat just kind of slides this way. Kind of cool. A lot of scooters, they open up this way or that way. The side loading is a very Yamaha thing. They even did it with the Yamaha C3, so it's pretty cool. On the left handlebar, I just love the controls of a lot of these 80s bikes. And sometimes you get bikes like Ducatis, they just seem like so strange, but you get used to it. Blinkers, that's your blinker. Middle is cancel. You have your horn. By the way, when you push horn, your ignition lights up. That's an amazing luxury back in the 1980s. And of course, your lights, that's your regular lights, and then you have your high beams, very short throw. horn, gas, and then all you really have is run and then kill, and then your start button that way. I like that they did make it symmetrical on one side to the other. Your mirrors are very useful, square ones or rectangular ones. This is how everything should be. Rectangular is so much easier to see than the stylish round ones, I think. You have one button, that's the reset for your trip. The trip is down here. Your odometer is 5,870 miles, so 5,000, close to 6,000 miles. 1984, barely ridden really. And then you have an H and a minute, so you can adjust your clock. The clock is always on. And you also have a fuel gauge. That's a luxury back in the day. And then you have your speedometer. It goes all the way to 80, but most likely you're going to be going 60 to 70. This is a quick bike. I was surprised. It's kind of slow off the line, and then it builds speed and it stays there. It's very stable. Up here, turn signal, oil. I don't think that's a button. And then you have side stand, high beam, and then turn. Well laid out. Of course, the front is rather strange. This is how they were trying to go in after the Lambretta and Vespa. They're creating this that kind of resembles a little bit more 1960s classic styling. They included the front fender with the front cowling of the bike. It's kind of cool, and it makes it easier to remove the front tire. You don't have to remove anything else. So kind of cool. And then you have Riva, Yamaha, 2 integrated blinkers. I am missing the left one. And then you have a slot here. See, I was actually trying to turn the bike that way. Normally, everything would turn on some bikes. This one does not. All of this kind of stays facing forward. And then you have little slots here where the horn sits. Behind the glass of the headlight, there are going to be other things, such as the relays for your turn signals. I have to replace this one. The turn signals are not working on this particular one. This is an H4 bulb as well, and an added benefit, this is glass, something you don't get on cars and motorcycles today. It's a dying thing to have a glass headlights. I always like to pet it like this because it is so much nicer. It doesn't fog up like all of those headlights that you see in all of these cars. This is the way to go. So let's talk about engine and performance. This particular engine is quite interesting. The Honda Elite kind of sits upright, so when you open up the seat, you get access to that engine head. But on this is actually more of a traditional orientation for an engine. The cylinder head is here. You remove this plastic cowling, you actually have access to the carburetor and the spark plug very easily. And it is a air-cooled engine as opposed to the Elite's liquid-cooled. So I'm kind of wondering why they went with air-cooled, because they were trying to compete with the Honda Elite. This particular scooter was cheaper and it was a 180 as opposed to the 150. So a lot of people that were interested in buying the 150, they looked at this as like, oh, this is cheaper, it is faster, and it doesn't require valve adjustments. So they kind of went with this one. And then you get quite a few other things. Like, you don't have a choke on this particular bike. This has got a very complex carb setup that uses 2 solenoids. And this is actually one of the bad things about this particular bike. The carburetors are difficult to work on because there's a lot of hoses going into them, as opposed to a traditional carb that you would have on a Honda Elite 150. And also, this particular bike, the best way to work on it is to simply remove the engine. That's right, remove the engine. But it's not as bad as you think. You remove the side plastics, this seat, and all of that. And then there's one bolt that you remove. It's a 21 millimeter. Then you remove the top bolt of the suspension, and then it comes fully out. Another big benefit of this is that the suspension nowadays is quite soggy, but the rear has one coil as opposed to a traditional scooter like the Elite 150. Another really interesting thing is that this has got a fan. The fan is not because it's liquid cooled, but it's just a fan that keeps your carburetor cool. And even when you turn off the key, it still spins for a couple of minutes and then it turns off. very interesting feature back in 1984. But for me, what I find interesting is that this is a hydraulic valve system that doesn't require adjustments. That makes it all the better in my view. I hate having to do valve adjustments. It's so much work. And this thing doesn't require them. I don't know any other scooter that has that. And the only other bikes that I know have hydraulic valve adjustments, like the Goldwings, the Harley Davidsons, and the top of the line cruisers. But when it comes to speed, this thing is really capable of 60 to 70 miles per hour. But for me, I would not go that fast because those little tiny tires just make it a little bit unsettling. With the little tires, it does perform very well as a scooter. It feels like a traditional small scooter. And it does have a small stature, because when you look at the Honda ADV, smaller engine, it is girthier, it's longer, and it is lighter, but this kind of feels more like a freight train. As you start going and you hit your speed, it will stay there. I think this would give a modern bike a run. My riding impressions is, I was actually surprised I could get this to run fairly easy. It's an old bike, it's a classic bike, and it rides perfectly. So even with the original carb, it starts and rides perfectly. And of course, the characteristics of riding is not up to modern standards. The suspension is very soggy. The one suspension shock in the rear is really not too good for riders these days. And of course, the front suspension is also very soft. So if you're going to keep one of these, you might want to get better suspension. It's not modern, but it's quirky and quite lovable. I think you would have to be a real lover of motorcycles to really admire this. But it's amazing to me that you can get a 40-year-old bike and you can ride it as if it's brand new. To get into scooters, this is a good alternative to get to the new scooters that cost $5,000 to $6,000. Vespas now are close to $10,000. So for $1,000, you can get something like this. And it is quite capable. It's a 180cc, that's approaching maxi scooter size, and it still feels like a small scooter. It's lovable, it's cute, it's unique, and it's incredibly cheap for what you can get these. This is a great alternative to the Honda Elite crowd. There's plenty of Honda Elites, I've seen them from time to time, but I've never seen one of these. That's why it makes it so much nicer. Riding something that nobody has, it's kind of cool. So if you ever come across a Riva 180 or one of its siblings, you're looking at more than just a scooter. You're looking at a little bit of history, a reaction to fuel crisis, design trends, and a shift on how people got around. The Riva 180 was Yamaha's answer to a specific moment in time, rising gas prices, a changing motorcycle market, and a new wave of city dwellers who wanted practical, stylish transport. It wasn't flashy like the Elite. It wasn't a tiny moped. It was this beautiful middle ground, a legit, freeway-capable scooter with style and substance.
The new Riva from Yamaha, with electric start, automatic transmission, and style. Like the freeway-legal Riva 180. It's transportation for people who are already there.
Okay guys, thanks for watching. If you like old bikes, you like old machines and the history of motorcycles, please give me a thumbs up and a subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And until the next time, I'll see you then.